Hey,
Huh?
hey, welcome, superhero politics.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so everybody, really quickly, I just want to introduce two of my favorite people in the world. They are the Funderburks, and they are Minister Keith Funderburk and Dr. Nannette Funderburk, and they are the owners and practitioners of the S.E.L group, the social and emotional learning group. And I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves and tell a little bit about how you came this way. I know we just all left church, so we're gonna keep it churchy today.
Well, Mike, again, we consider it an honor and a privilege to be with the team today. To be here with Superhero Politics is just an honor. It really is. You're just doing a fabulous work in this community. And now that, of course, with your podcast, is just an opportunity for us to just be just a little bit of assistance to really educate the community at large. Again, my name is Minister Keith Funderburk. And I've actually, I've always had an interest in politics. Even when I graduated from college, that was my major. It was in political science. I've always had an interest to help people in the community in some form of capacity. And it may have been through ministry, it may be through community engagement and education, just a variety of forms. So that's a little bit about me. Of course, my wife.
Well, I think he did a great job introducing there. I'm Dr. Nannette Funderburk. Just call me Nannette. And we've, I guess, been doing this counseling thing, S.E.L group thing for about 15 years. And so our goal is always to help people to be their best selves, but in a very, very practical way. So I'm not trying to talk over anybody's head. I'm not trying to, just say things just to say things. Our goal is always to be meaningful and practical.
Outstanding. So, the one thing that we always do when we come on, when I have folks on superhero politics, is we try to blend the two. Like we try to blend the worlds. And so, for me, I've long been in politics and been around comic books and the comic book world even longer than that. And so, anytime that I bring folks on or I have a conversation with folks, not to analyze them like you guys do, but I always ask them the question about who are their favorite superheroes. So I knowing you guys a long time, I didn't, I asked simply because, just for the sake of the show, but I already knew. But who are you guys' favorite superheroes?
Well, I know you're right. You did ask us before the show, and I think I left one out because I think I have multiple. So I'm going to throw one out there to you that will be a surprise as well, if that's okay.
Okay.
Okay, so the one I initially gave you, or that I gave to Keith to initially give to you, was Wonder Woman, of course. And Keith's, yes, was Superman there. The one that I did not mention and should have is the Hulk. I used to love
what? What? The Hulk? No.
Oh,
All right. So I always ask people to explain why they choose certain superheroes. Like, so, I'm gonna go ahead. We're gonna skip over Wonder Woman. We're gonna talk about why you, mild-mannered psychotherapist Nannette Funderburk, would choose the Hulk. Do you have a rage monster inside of you that nobody know about?
Like, that's what it was. It was Anna. Oh, you don't like me when I'm angry.
No, I like Hulk. Now, don't get me wrong. Hulk has his issues, without question. But there's definitely a strength, there in Hulk, and Hulk really tries not to go there. He tries to, you know, keep his calm and maintain composure. I think, you know, for movie's sake, people like to see him go there. Because I can remember in one of the, I can't remember if it was, I think it was an Avengers movie, where Iron Man was literally poked him to try to bring out, he's like, where's the big guy? You know,
Yeah.
and he was trying to bring him out, and Hulk is looking, or well, he wasn't Hulk at that time. He was, you know, mild-mannered professor. And he just kind of looked at him like, you know, you're stupid, get away from me, basically. So he was able to keep it down, you know, keep it calm. But I like Hulk's strength, and I like the effort that Hulk puts into trying to be the best version of himself. He doesn't always make it, but he puts effort into it.
And I think that's interesting today if we talk about our political climate, because it seems that it used to be when I was growing up, there was some hint or some at least effort to maintain decorum, and that, you know, even on the floor of the General Assembly, on the floor of the Senate or the House, you never referred to anyone by their name if you were calling them out. You always would say the gentlewoman from, you know, Tennessee, or the gentleman from North Carolina. You didn't call anybody out. And now we're going on the floor saying people's names and airing all their business, and we see it leaking out into our society, and how, depending on what side of the political aisle you are, you literally have no restraint in what you say about people. Now, I'm not even going to front. I've been kicked off of Twitter more than once, so so I can feel your pain there, and so maybe I need to be a little bit more Bruce Banner and a little less Hulk. But I can tell you, it is difficult out here in these streets to deal with folks, and that speaks to mental health. And so, as folks who work in the sphere of trying to help people, um, how do you maintain your mindset, and how do you protect your mental health when you are exposing yourself to this kind of stimulation?
Well, I'm gonna take a stab at it, and of course, Nannette, she'll follow up. One of the things I think is extremely important as an individual is that we have a set of core values and what we want and how we want to be perceived as our brand. One of the things I know is in this day and age, you know, there's so many things that are stimulating a person's, I guess, psyche. You know, between the rise of social media through again, the social media aspects of it, the traditional advertising, and now it's just we are being stoked with so much, and so sometimes I think we have lost our value at our core, the core value of who we are on the inside. You know, if
Keith,
I'm going to be
now, Keith, are you talking about this personal values, or is this also political values? Because sometimes, you know, our politics you would think they would line up, but sometimes folks who espouse certain personal values doesn't seem to always line up with their political values. So, are you talking about the personal or the political values?
well, you know, ideally the personal values would drive your political value. But in today's environment, it is changed. You know, now it's so cloudy. You don't, you know, begin to know, you know, what is it they believe on an individual basis versus at a political level. And that's frustrating again for members of the community. You know, if I'm looking at a particular congressional person or a senator, you know, I'm like, okay, well, what is it that they really believe? Because if they're fighting for, let's say, you know, gun rights, but yet they are still you know, are they promoting gun rights, or are they promoting um, the things that is impacting families across America with people dying? I think I heard one of the biggest numbers in youth deaths might have been school shootings.
It's
That
number
is,
one.
yeah, number
It's number
one.
one. The number one cause of death today for youth is gun violence, not cancer, not drunk driving, not obesity. It's gun violence. It's number one cause of death.
And so to me, Mike, when I heard that stat, I believe it's, I don't know, and recently, I'm thinking, okay, there has to be a change. There has to be a change, because if our young people, if this is how they're dying, that means something, as a mom, as a dad, as an aunt and uncles, grandparents, what is it that we're saying? And if we're not saying it loud enough, we need to make sure that we're calling up Washington, we're calling up the state capitals, and we're going to make a difference and make a change.
Now, Dr. Funderburk, when Keith is talking about calling up Washington, we've seen, and for those of you who don't know, the Funderburks and I have worked together for years. And some years ago, when the Affordable Care Act was passed, we went on the radio and we talked about policy in mental health and how it would affect access to mental health care. So recently in North Carolina, we just after 13 years, expanded Medicaid. So that means that those who are on the lower income scale will now have access to healthcare. How do you think that will affect people now seeking mental health care? And how do you, as someone from the mental health care community, impact your political leaders and get them to understand the importance of mental health care and in what you do?
Okay, so first question was, how do I see Medicaid expansion impacting the masses, basically,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
So first of all, I would say that, I see it impacting large numbers of folks because they simply have more access now. And access oftentimes is the key to actually getting people what it is that they need, getting the need met. So now I don't think this is the only thing that needs to be done, but it's a definite start. I think that even just saying, hey, this is here for you, it says that it sends a message and says, we're trying to meet a need for you. Hey, is there a need for you? Check, look at you and see, is there a need for you as far as mental health is concerned? I mean, it says it for all of healthcare, but since we're talking about mental health, or since I'm mental health, that's the direction I'm going. But it allows you to check yourself to say, okay, they've put this out there for us. Why have they put this out there for us? Let me check into this to see, why have they put this out there for us? And we don't have to look very far to be able to see that mental health is not just a hot topic right now. It's a legit, for real thing that needs to be addressed. So I think when people see, oh, okay, now I have a different level of access than I had before, I have been wanting to talk to somebody, let me go see who's available for me. I think it sends a message. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, because when we talk about politics and we talk about the comic book world, one of the underlying themes of that is always the mental state of our body politic, and then we look at the superheroes that are in the comic books, and there's always this idea, because you got to have a certain mindset to want to throw yourself into um, into battle against the forces of evil every day, and so when we look at mental health, it's something that is addressed in both policy and in the comic world. Like, say for instance, there's always examples of kind of the hero mentality, and so I know a lot of times that politicians or folks in the public sphere, see themselves as the heroes, but then again, someone who has opposing political views of you sees you as the villain, and
Mm-hmm.
so when you're out fighting and advocating for these types of policies, how do you make sure that you don't necessarily, kind of lose yourself in the daily fight?
Mm-hmm. So that's where all of us can easily have our own mental health issues. So if we're not checking us, if we're not looking in the mirror, you can go there, like Hulk would go there sometimes. You can go there and almost go there in the name of good. Um,
Oh,
and think that you are doing something wonderful until you look back and see all the carnage that you have left in the wake. You know, you watch these movies, and yes, the superhero does get the baby out of the car and grab the person out of the building and all of that good stuff. But it's like, how many buildings did they knock down to get that one person out? So I think there has to be an awareness, and you have to have some folks around you who are going to knock on that door for you and say, hey, okay, yeah, I see what you did there. Let's look at the full picture. Let's look at the whole picture here. Because there lots of times are other things that we need to watch just as closely.
They say, you know, the villain believes he's the hero of his own story. So that's, you know, you look at someone like Lex Luthor, who says, hey, I'm just a human in the midst of all these gods, and I'm protecting humanity, even no matter, you know, even if I have to kill them all to do it, you know. So I think it's just, you know, I think it's one of those interesting paradoxes that we face. So so we've talked about your favorite superheroes. Who are your favorite political heroes? Because obviously this is superhero politics, so we got to talk about both sides. Who are some of the folks in the political realm that has inspired you guys to do what you do?
Well, I'll take it first on my side, and I think about it from an historical perspective. First is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You know, we just coming out of April, or we're in the month of April. This is the year of the month that Dr. King was assassinated, April 4th, 1968. And ironically, it was in Tennessee. For Dr. King, he actually, you know, he spoke of a nonviolence. He spoke of how community comes together and make a difference. You know, he talked about how we as an African Americans can use our voice, how we can come together and use the ability to do a sit-in, to do a march. You know, he didn't promote necessarily violence, but he promoted doing something that was good for the man. And he used practical principles that was in the Bible. And I think that was one of the things that really shook America.
Gee, is that outdated? Is that an outdated methodology today? Because we look at things like January 6th, and we look at Charlottesville, and we look at what just happened in the Tennessee General Assembly, where those two young, dynamic brothers, the Justins, were there protesting with kids who were trying to stop senseless gun violence so they can feel safe in school. And they were expelled, overturning their elections by the rest of the body. Now, is the King methodology still relevant considering these acts of political violence that we are like? Are we responding? Are we not responding? Because some people would say we need to be a little less Superman and a little bit more Punisher. You know, a little bit more, you know, anti-hero, a little bit more returning the fire that we're under. Is this still relevant today politically?
Well, you know, again, going back to Dr. King, again, before Dr. King was of course, doctor, he was reverend. And so the real deal is, I'm going to always go back to the biblical principles, and that is love. The love that Dr. King had for his neighbors, that's going to be the key and the crucial of making change. But we got to show that love, and we can show it in different ways. Now, I do believe how the community comes together is very different than Dr. King's day. You know, we've got to embrace young people and how we do social change. Social change is different. Racism is different in our community. And so it's not as overt, it's more covert. And people are able to hide their own opinions and thoughts, but yet it comes out in policy. It comes out in how you vote. Now, I could imagine there in Tennessee now, some of those state legislatures, they probably are legislators, they're not realizing, man, this actually impacted national politics and not international politics. They're probably regretting some of their votes because these guys, they were just trying to protest what took place with these folks dying. I mean, with these kids, you know, and so it's so important that, you know, we've got to stay connected to what's really true to the community and what's at the heart.
Great point. So, Dr. Funderburk, your political heroes.
Well, so it probably won't be too surprising that that the name that I gave you is female, kind of like the initial superhero I gave you is female, and I am representing her today. I don't know if you can see my Wonder Woman here. So the name that I gave you initially was Geraldine Ferraro. And I do, I was little when she was in her heyday. I was very little. And it kind of surprises me that I even remember her in the way that I do. But I think the reason I remember her, well, she was the first woman I remember who was on the ticket for VP. Also, though, some other just kind of like Hulk popped up after I sent Wonder Woman. I had two others that popped up too, but still the same premise is behind them. And so those were Barbara Jordan and Shirley Chisholm. And so, and I know I didn't give you Shirley Chisholm because names started popping up for me. But I think the key there is, you always hear people talking about now how representation matters. And I think that's what they were for me. They represented some function or some facet of me just because they were female, right? And of course, Barbara Jordan and Shirley Chisholm were Black females. And I know Shirley Chisholm's heyday was before I was born. I'm not sure about Barbara Jordan, but even if her heyday was after I had been born, I'm sure, an infant when she was, in her heyday. But I regularly would hear those names just kind of float through my household. And I'm sure I heard other political names float through my household too as a child, but those were the ones that stuck out. And I think it's the representation of, those people are like me. I want to pay attention just a little bit more to them. And I can be just as outspoken as they are. I can, make my points just like they can. I can disagree with somebody just like they can. And I don't have to be, I'm born and raised in the South, so I don't have to be that, nice little Southern belle who's sitting in the corner and making dinner. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I don't have to be that if I choose not to be that. And so I think that's why those ladies really stuck out to me.
It was funny that you said that, and it reminds me of when Bill Clinton was running and Hillary Rodham Clinton was being introduced to the world in politics. And she's an attorney, accomplished attorney in her own right, and worked in government. And she said, I don't want to be some little Tammy Wynette baking cookies standing by your man. I don't have to be that. And people thought that was so radical to hear. But you said a word um, that is really driving conversation now in both politics and in comic books, and that word is representation. And so, as we see now, we see more heroes of color coming to the screen, from Black Panther to Captain America. Sam Wilson now is Black. We see that Wonder Man, who is a Marvel character, is going to come to the screen. Aquaman is now Asian Pacific Islander. Blue Beetle is coming later on this month. Is Hispanic. King the Conqueror, who has traditionally been portrayed as a white man, is now played by Jonathan Majors. The Little Mermaid is going to be Halle Bailey, and so you see this representation now coming to the screen, and people are having some culture shock with it. So imagine what it was back in the day when Shirley Chisholm was running to seek the presidency as a Black woman in the 70s. And so now, what we're seeing is, it is a little less common, but no less controversial when you start to see this. And you think by now, after having elected a Black president and elected a Black and Asian vice president, that we wouldn't be here, but yet we are. Why is America struggling with the emergence of people of color in all spaces? Why is America struggling with that?
Well, I think it still has something to do with somewhat that representation piece. So now it's like other people are being represented. So since others are being represented, and this, you know, can be, it could be true or not true. It is my power going somewhere now since other people are being represented. You know, and that's debatable as to who originally had the power. Did you deserve the power? What did you do with the power when you did have it? You know, all of those things I think are necessary questions to be answered as well. I think another point though with representation, and I think we saw this in help me out here, in the Warnock and Walker.
Yes.
Right? Those were two Black
Senate
men.
race in Georgia. Yeah.
Yes, those were two Black men. And I heard, I can't remember, one of the political pundits mentioning it's not just representation that matters, because I think that was what the other side was thinking. Oh, okay, we've got this Black man up here, so okay, great, we're good to go. But it's appropriate representation that matters, because if you just throw anything up at the wall to see if it sticks, you know, you're probably just going to have a mess up there, which I think was some of what we saw not too long ago with that election. So it has to be appropriate representation. It's not just, you know, stick anybody up there and I'm gonna go for it, you know, because we're no dummies either. So we're going to parse through what is being presented just like anybody else would. But going back to the initial point, I think power is a huge piece of power, and the fear of losing power.
And we know that power is an essential theme in the comic world. I mean, who has the most of it, who gains it. You know, we talk about how Thanos sought the Infinity Stones because he wanted ultimate power to reshape the universe. And so power is a theme in both politics and in the comic world. So I want to move on to the kind of the heart of this episode today. And I want to talk about mask, and I want to talk about identities, and I want to talk about how that is relevant in the comic world. And so, as we see that one of the central themes of comic books is the hero's secret identity. So, why do they do it? Why do we have it? Why do they wear masks? But I want to talk about that um, in the mental health reality. Do we as people, especially as leaders, do we wear masks? And if so, why? And is it necessary?
Yes, we absolutely do wear masks. And I think on some level, it may be necessary just because you can't expose everything to everybody. It's kind of like, you know, would you walk outside naked? You know, no, I'm going to put something on. Even when I go to the beach, I'm going to have something on. Most people are going to say that, that they would have something on. So I don't, that's my choice. That's my right to not reveal everything about me to just anyone who's out there. So I think it's definitely a level of protection, but it's you know, it's also it's protection of the vulnerabilities, but also just protection of the things that are uniquely or personally mine, and I can choose or choose not to expose that.
If
Go
we,
ahead.
but we think about say heroes, and we think about politicians and people who represent us and people that we trust. Is it do we have to have an enhanced level of transparency? So, you know, we've got a few people up here on the screen now. We've got Superman and Clark Kent, and that's the funniest. It's always the funniest secret identity of all time. You know, it's just some. It's you know, just a um pair of glasses. And so we've got Batman who wears a mask, and then we've got, you know, Green Lantern, Guy Gardner. He doesn't wear a mask. He doesn't care. But we've got some of these, dichotomies up here of some people who are heroes and they don't wear masks, and some people who do. So why is it important? Do we have to have some level of transparency to gain trust? And I really want to bring that, because this the individual that we're talking about, I want to talk about today, is George Santos. Fabricated his entire life and was able to win an election in New York, in a district that's typically held by Democrats. So he had a secret identity that nobody knew about, and it was Miss Katara. Get it, girl? You know. So here he is, living a whole double life, and won a seat. And so now people don't have faith and trust in elected officials or their heroes, because they think that everything is a facade or a mask. So, do we have to take the mask off? Do we have to get behind the mask in order to earn the people's trust?
So one of the things I guess I would like to add, clarify, is that I still believe that just as human beings, we don't have to share every single thing. It's helpful, especially in this realm of politics, though, if there is congruence or some level of genuineness that flows throughout the things that you see and the things that you don't see. Because that's when I think people are a little like, well, wait a minute, what are you, A does not match B. How to help me to reconcile this? So that's the piece that I think may be missing, is that congruence, that genuine nature, because it seems like, you're showing me two totally different people here.
And also when I think about in this situation, and like in others, you really want authenticity. You want someone that's genuine, because when you say one thing publicly and do something different privately, that puts you in a situation. Okay, is this person really being true to me, or giving me truthful information? Because if this one person, if you got a particular platform, and it might be the platform of the party, but then you adapt or adopt that as your personal platform, but then when you are out, when you're in your own home, or when you're doing certain things, if you're totally against a particular item, well, that's, you begin to think about hypocrisy. You begin to think about, can I really trust you? Because you're saying one thing, but you're doing another.
And I think also, oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, we just had an issue in North Carolina where Democratic state rep Trisha Cotham changed over to being a Republican. We saw it with Kirsten Sinema, who after winning the Democratic winning the seat in Arizona as a Democrat, became an independent. And so we've seen that people put their faith and trust based on what they believe are shared political beliefs, and then the person that they have voted for then changes on them. And so it lends to this lack of credibility in the world of politics, and it makes everyone look self-serving and hypocritical and disingenuous.
So, it would be great. I don't know that we would ever be able to get to this, but it would be great if we knew the real whys behind why these things are done, because there are real whys behind why these things are done. But you're right, that is the piece that makes it seem disingenuous and makes people just kind of want to throw their hands up and say, I'm done with it all. But there are still genuine folks out there. I believe there are genuine politicians out there. Now, can you get caught up in that spin cycle of the world of politics? I believe that happens too. So I think the nuances are so much trickier than we are able to even do anything about, or even recognize it sometimes as us standing on the outside. You know, we just don't really know what's going on in that world. And then when you throw in shows like Scandal and all of these other, there's not another show popping into my head right now, maybe like what was the one where the Designated Survivor, those types of shows, that further puts doubt into our minds as to what is really going on here. And then we see situations like Katara versus Santos, and it almost seems like, well, that is a movie, right? That's not real. That didn't really happen. So it does start to shift the way we, as the average everyday citizen, starts to see politics and the way we want to engage in politics, because we're just real everyday average working people. And so it seems like all the people that have the power, they're the ones with all of the sticky stuff going on.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And we've got a few minutes left, and I just wanted to kind of just, as someone who's in that world, it is very difficult because now it's just not you that is caught up in the sticky stuff. Now, you know, your kids, your wife, everyone else, because you've chosen to have a public persona, is also caught up in that. And so maybe that lends to why superheroes and politicians both try to conceal the most of who they are, because it's not just protecting them, it's also protecting their loved ones as well.
Great
So,
point.
Dr. Funderburk, Nannette Funderburk, and Minister Keith Funderburk, thank you guys for being with me today on Superhero Politics. And so, if you're out there and you are struggling with identity, or you're struggling with anything in the mental health world, please check out the link. It will be in the notes of the show to the S.E.L group. They are, you know, really great resources to be able to help you with all the things that you're dealing with in terms of mental health. There's no more stigma to seeking mental health care. It is now something that everyone should consider. Coming through a once in a generation pandemic, with our society as polarized as it is, everyone needs to really think about who they are on a day-to-day basis, so that you don't end up unleashing that hope that's inside of you, just like the young trans person did in Tennessee, just like so many other mass shooters have done prior to that. And so, really consider your mental health. It's part of your overall health. And you know, if you were dealing with anything else physically, you'd go get that checked out, and make sure that you do that now. There are resources just like the S.E.L group that are there to help you. So until next time, folks, continue to be kind to one another. Look out, mentor, lead, share. You may not have to have a superpower, but you can be a hero to someone. And like I always say, you don't have to be a superhuman to be a superhuman. Until next time, this is your host, Michael Holmes, and this has been Superhero Politics. Peace.